started officially.
Yeah. It's intense.
It's intense. Okay, welcome to the podcast. I am Tyler Rich, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am here with my co-host.
So I am Alan. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor here in Nevada.
Oh, I always what do I say? Perfect. I mess it up sometimes. I was writing your profile online, and I was like, wait, that's not right.
Yeah.
That's not right.
In Nevada is the only one that labels us not a licensed professional counselor. I don't know why.
I think that's what I put you on your psychology.
Yeah, like LPC is everywhere else.
Yeah.
Except Nevada. It's LCPC.
And that's not even on Psychology Today. I just did LPC.
Yeah. Well, that's because MFTs didn't want CPCs.
Oh, Nevada politics. Okay, so welcome to the podcast. This is our very first one. Alan and I have known each other for 3 to 4 years now, and Alan just started working at the group practice. And we sat around probably 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Or so. It doesn't feel like it was that long.
I think it was actually while we were still with Gary, and I proposed the idea.
Yeah, because we talked about doing something like this, and we both realized we're crazy Disney people. So we wanted to do a podcast where we take psychology and mix it with Disney stuff. Because why not? Because that's what we would do anyway when we're talking. So we said, why not set up a microphone and do it?
You know, and since we were under the supervision of someone with depth, we used a lot of narratives and fairy tales to talk about therapy. And so since we have so much knowledge about Disney, and since we use it in our practice anyway, why not kind of get it out there and kind of see how people respond to it?
Yeah, I said something the other day. I asked a client if they knew. I was like, do you watch Westworld? They're like, no. And I was like, oh, have you seen this Disney movie? Yes. So for some reason, they resonate a little bit better than other things. So today we're going to talk all about Inside Out. So first, before we dive and kind of dissect it, because we both watched it, we took a lot of notes to talk about. When you first when I said, let's talk about Inside Out first, like what came to mind? Like when you think of that originally, what was your thoughts before looking at it again?
So like the first thought that always jumps out is Inside Out is such a great tool in therapy because there's emotions like labeled as characters, it's really easy for people to pick up on it. And so for me, it was like being able to see an emotion and how it plays out is a way that we can kind of use that emotion and integrate it into like how we handle things, learning how kind of the interplay of emotions and where they help and where maybe some emotions hinder us.
See, I always I use Inside Out, so I would tell my clients to watch the movie to recognize that sadness is okay.
Yeah.
And that was the big takeaway. I'm usually because it's like I love the premise, and we should have done a spoiler warning. Anytime we talk about a movie, we're going to spoil the crap out of it.
Of course.
And it's older now, so we'd assume, but I figured that would be polite. Yeah. I always tell clients to watch the movie and wait till the end so they can learn that sadness is okay. Because so many times clients don't want to feel, they call them bad emotions. I hate referring to them as bad. I always say they're uncomfortable, but they serve a purpose. And if we don't learn to recognize it, we're going to avoid them. And that causes all the problems in our psyche and all the other issues that show up in our life.
Yeah. Same. I never classify anything as good or bad. Talking about it, how I feel like emotions are just indicators. So emotions are very adaptive, and it's really helpful for us to be able to understand why the emotion is happening. So even one that I love to throw out at clients, and it will tie into kind of the sadness piece. Archaically, how do we learn when something was not okay for us to eat? Well, we got sick to our stomach. We felt bad. Right?
Yeah.
But that's not I am bad. It's not a bad thing. It's just we feel sick. Yeah. And so emotions, I think, are just the same thing for our mental health. So when we experience something like sadness, it indicates something's going on that we have to pay attention to, or we're doomed to repeat the same mistake.
Yeah, pay attention to me. Pay attention to me.
Exactly. So kind of moving from that, I think another beautiful part, not just the validity of all emotions, but talks about Inside Out really shows us that there's like a multiplicity to us. That we have these different things that we are affected by, not just the emotions, right? So we have a wide range of emotions that all take on different personalities, but there's also the labels of the core memories.
So when you say like multiplicity, that's almost kind of like the way the movie shows like the islands of like those personalities, right?
Yes.
That we all are made up of hundreds if not thousands, of parts of ourselves like that.
Yeah.
And really kind of figuring out who they are. They made it super simple in the movie.
Yeah.
But she's 11 in
Yeah,
the movie,
yeah.
so it would make sense that there would only be a few.
Yeah, and it's beautiful because it shows how they're made, and it also shows how they might be lost.
Yeah.
And lost being just kind of like they turned gray and they fell because they no longer fit the scenario. And I think we'll kind of tease her into it, but how that mechanic, like how it plays, how we can see it form, and how even when they have passed at the, kind of really hinting towards the end here, we can see how they come back and in what way. So it helps us look at the things that affect us. So kind of like, the Goofy Island, right?
Yeah.
Like it was a way for her to enter a persona, right? Like this is like, when I'm in this place, there's like this hint that kind of gets you in the mood. And once you're there, you have an idea of what the world is like, how you want to be. And you also know how you want people to be with you. And so I think it's really important to see how we have so many different things going on inside of us.
All the time. And it gets super confusing. Another thing that stood out to me at the beginning or before I rewatched the movie is a concept that I think I try to tell my clients a lot about, which is sometimes you could have the best parents in the world and there's some wounds that get developed, right? So the fact that like mom and dad moved her to another set, like the whole premise of the movie starts with them moving. Yeah. So, and that's where it gets all this stuff going. Her parents didn't do anything wrong. They didn't do anything bad, but it really impacted her. And I think that if we can start to look at sometimes our parents will inflict wounds on us without realizing it. And it doesn't take away that they're great parents. It just means this thing that they did impacted me and influenced me. And I think that could be a really powerful way to like normalize normalizing your past.
Yeah, and not just that, I think it shows how important patience and opportunity and chances are. As much as we like to idolize parents, we think that they are always going to get it right, there's going to be this murky space where none of us know what's going on, and we don't know how to communicate what we're feeling, what we're going through, and parents aren't mind readers. Just like nobody's a mind reader. I say that a lot in session. And kind of what that does is I think gives us more control over entering a situation, and instead of stepping into it and panicking, maybe we can step in and triage. Maybe we can try to identify what's going on and try to exert some kind of control.
I love that. I was hear you talk. I was like, I wish I could talk like that in session. I don't have that vocabulary. It's so good. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we move into so we watched the movie. We took a lot of notes. What was it? So as you started watching, what kind of comes up first for you? What were some big things that you thought would be important to look at?
So immediately, and I think this is a little bit of a bias because I watched the movie before. So when I stepped in, I think this is the first time I've rewatched it as a therapist. And immediately I found myself disliking Joy.
I did the same exact thing. I was like, she's like the villain.
Yes. I genuinely think that she was. And so kind of the first thing that came to my mind was that toxic positivity. It was always joy all the time. And anytime there was a situation that didn't match her framework, she found a way to write it off. And I found myself really responding negatively to that.
She discounted so much of what was going on with any of the other characters. Like, let's turn it around. Let's put it... And I mean, I think there's something to be said about putting a positive lookout on something, but also we can deny a lot of other feelings, if you will, when we put too much of a spin on it. And yeah, she totally... I had the same exact feeling about her being that... what did I write? Let me look. You can keep going.
So one of the first things, and it's a little bit, I think like 10, 20 minutes into the movie, you pick up on this language a lot where, Joy tells Sadness, what is your role? I don't understand it. And then instead of attempting to understand it, she just says, well, you just need to find the fun in it. She finds ways to distract Sadness. And something that I found that was really unsettling for me was she never took the time to say, I don't know what your role is. Can you explain it to me? She didn't make space for Sadness at all at the beginning of the movie. And that's why I think that it's that toxic positivity, because it's disregarding anything else that we feel and just kind of saying, well, just get better, just be better, just do better.
So I wrote something about toxic pressure from the parents. Yeah. And it almost would make sense if we look at it this way, is that her parents were putting so much toxic joy pressure on her that could explain why this the defense mechanism she would have to not be able just to experience what she's experiencing to joy. Like, who's my happy girl? He kept saying, like, who's my and it's like, we're just moved. It's that. Like, why don't you ask what she's feeling, not put that pressure on? And the mom did the same thing in a way. Like, we're so proud of you. You've just been so like positive and good through this. And why that's not bad.
Yeah.
It's also not giving the space to like learn and mature and grow emotionally. And
that's where I feel like when we find language to talk about it, so when we talk about toxic positivity and we talk about the validity of the other emotions, we're maybe helping clients recognize the control that they can have. Because something that, like what you're mentioning, the parents, well, right, if the parents had better language, they might have been able to step into that and attune to her emotions. And not that I expect an 11-year-old to, but I also try to empower my clients to say, I can't be happy. Being able to recognize that they're going through this too, and being able to almost throw something out there that changes the direction of the story.
Yeah. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening so far. I just wanted to jump in here real fast, just to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. We just started. We really want the podcast to grow and take off, so you can be the first to help us grow. So if you are a Disney fan and you love Disney stuff, go on and like the podcast, subscribe to it on your favorite podcast station. You can find us on YouTube too. We're going to post everything on there and little clips of the episodes also. If you want to comment about anything we talk about in this episode or future episodes, you can leave comments if you're watching it on YouTube, or you can check out our show notes on your podcast player, and it will link to our website where you can leave comments specifically, or you can get in contact with us. We thank you so much for just subscribing and helping us support the podcast as we continue to grow. So with that, let's get back to the show.
Kind of hinting on and talking about what you just brought in, the expectation to stay happy is something I noticed as well. And it was how the neglecting of those emotions really kind of hinders her ability to even like talk about it. Because I think that there's at different points where she recognizes something's happening and she looks to others to see kind of what they're doing. So we kind of mirror others, which is why I think like culturally it's important to make space to talk about these emotions so that we can kind of create this normal space where it's all emotions exist and they're all valid. And I think people get really worried about that, because I think if we validate someone's feelings, maybe objectively, maybe someone is exaggerating. Yeah. And maybe we know, but I don't think it helps that person to be told you're over exaggerating, calm down. I think it's important to say, wow, this is really affecting you. And creating a space where they can talk about it so we can kind of see where it needs to land. Because I think that when we feel something, it's up here. Yeah. And by creating space, it's almost like a landing strip. If we can create a space for this to land, we can land it somewhere more appropriate.
When I think it just hit me this space where we're so trained to not know how to feel. Yeah. Right. We're trained to stick into whatever emotion. So she saw at the beginning of the movie, before their stuff got there and everything, right? Her parents are kind of arguing or frustrated, and she saw them frustrated, and her immediate response, not even looking at the emotion piece, she just wanted to respond to make them feel better. Yeah. That the coping mechanisms in the family was to get rid of any negative, uncomfortable, bad emotions and only be in this positive. Everything has to be good. Yeah. And that might be a trend that's in their family because they didn't give space. And there was no moment of space up until the very end. That was when there was finally space given, which obviously is part of the plot and everything else. So it makes sense why they do it that way. But it's what we do in our lives. How often are we giving space to hard stuff?
Absolutely. And talking about that culture of I'm going to kind of throw that word out, numbing. Right, numbing and distracting, that really kind of leads into I think what we start to see in the next part of the next part of the film, where it's the console begins to numb, and as the console begins to numb, we see her disconnected from her emotions. She's no longer able to participate with any of them, and the emotions aren't able to affect the console anymore. And so one of the things that I had kind of put down, and it's going to be a really kind of clinical jargon for a second. So the pursuit of preserving the past, right? She's trying to reconnect to those good feelings. And so she numbs away. And so a term that I like to try to educate clients on is dissociation. And so I think that when I saw that, my mind went, right, oh my gosh, she's dissociated. She is unable to connect to these emotions. And in that, right, she is constellated in the past, and so she can't kind of repair, she can't find new connections. It's almost like that's trauma.
Yeah.
Right? So unattended, that kind of, I think, is what sparks trauma.
Well, and so I work a lot with addictions, like a lot of behavioral addictions, and you just saying that kind of hit me with like the numbing piece, right? That in the movie she lost her core memories, right? She lost parts of her personality, but really, if we don't know how to work through a trauma, we're going to numb stuff. It's almost like those parts of our personality are going to gray out and fall. Yeah. And then we even lose the memories. Because one of the things that's a side effect of a long-term addiction is we start to like lose a lot of memories that made us who we are. And then the addiction takes over, making that be a huge part of the identity. And it's learning how to heal as much as possible, trying to refine those memories or form new parts of your personality.
And so kind of responding to that, right? So that pursuit of the past, we can get attached to what we thought brought happiness.
Yeah.
And so, like addiction, at a point, going out and having a couple beers with friends was a lot of fun. And so I could see how we can get lost in if I just keep doing that. And then we get stuck because we have kind of almost concretized that fun is this. And so what she does, right? She thinks, well, if I just go back, it's going to be great. But what we don't, and what she's not aware of, right, is the friendship, right? So like that friendship, and when Friendship Island went down, she felt the disconnection from friends. So even if she went back, these things have already changed.
Yeah.
And so what I think it does is it numbs us. It tries to get us to chase things in our past. And therefore, kind of our story gets stagnant, and we can't see how to take this understanding and transpose it on top of our current life. So, right, Friendship Island went down because she felt disconnected from friendship. And it is uncomfortable, but kind of what she needs is to find friendships that there's more proximity, that she can do things with. And then because she was so fixated on trying to get into the past, and she was kind of numbing, and she was kind of losing out, she couldn't even appreciate hockey when she went and tried to do it again.
Yeah. That just kind of makes me think about how one of the ways we know to heal from the past and work through like addictions or traumas, because you're talking so much about like turning back into the past, it's how do I stay present, right? Yeah. So we always talk, so you're here in therapy circles, and it's hit moments in pop culture of mindfulness meditation. Yeah. But that actually helps like stay in the present, right? So we're not losing ourselves in the pursuit of maybe the past or the trauma when we can just be mindful. Because if she could have just focused on, I enjoy hockey, or I enjoy, I don't know, school. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I get it. Actually, I think that really syncs up with one of my notes, which was that what stopped her from being able to enjoy those things is actually really, I think, it's hinted at in the movie in such a subtle way, and I love that I caught it when Joy picked up one of the, I think, happiness globes. I think towards the end,
yeah,
she's able to
rewind it.
Yeah, either rewind or fast forward. I forget. It turns into sadness, right? So she had that beautiful moment with the game, and then just like as Sadness had said, after that game, there was this sadness, and so I think that it's actually keeping in the moment allows us to stay present with the material. The hard part of sitting in that is not knowing what to do with the material.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're sitting with, this happy memory turned sad, that sadness can feel really uncomfortable because we don't know what to do with it. And so kind of what I had written down in my notes was part of her wanting to run away and attaching to the past and blaming the parents was her being unable to grieve, being unable to express these things that were happy are now sad because of blank, right? And just like a math equation, if x plus y equals blank, right?
Yeah.
If we can get both those, oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've done math. Variables, right?
Yeah.
You can only solve for one variable before you get into like weird complex math. But so if you can have x and y, then you can have the solution, you can have the end result. And so I think that's what's important to grieve, is not to just sit in the moment, which mindfulness helps us do, but it's also having a way of taking that information and putting it where it needs to go.
Yes. And so as you were saying that, it made me think of the note that I had down, which was, it's funny how we didn't talk about our notes really. Like we looked at them, but we didn't really talk through them before we did this. That when Bing Bong was sad, right, after the wheelbarrow went into the ravine, he was just crying, and Joy tried to come in and put that mask on it, right? Like we were talking about before, that toxic joy. But sadness just sat in it, right?
Yep.
But it wasn't just sitting in it, it was the empathy of when I can share what I'm feeling with someone and someone can just hold that space. That's, we know what to do. Like for some reason, just sharing something that's hard with somebody who's safe to share with, we feel better. Like that's putting it somewhere. And that's such a hard concept to like recognize that like all I have to do is like share this with somebody who's safe for me to share it with. Yeah. And I'll be better. Like that's where I put it. Like that's how I can work through some of these things that are super uncomfortable.
And I think it's important to know what safe means, because I think we mix that up a lot. We have parents that are safe because they love us, they provide for us, and they give us opportunity. But that doesn't mean that they're always willing to understand. I think that's the big part, is understanding and then validating.
Yes.
So once we enter a safe space with someone and we share this information, it has to be like we said earlier, like up here. We have to be able to accept it in its like up here state, so we can sit down and figure out what we want to do with it. And you're right. Joy kept trying to just dismiss his feelings, his sadness, and he couldn't get up. He wanted to wallow because he felt like maybe he was unworthy, right? Joy's having, she's all this peppy, all this energy. Yeah. So how can I down here feel worthy enough to continue with you? And I think that sadness really was that bridge.
So when Brene Brown talks about when someone's in a dark hole, right, and somebody puts their head down, there's a great video I'll link to.
Yep.
If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll link to the video. You put a silver lining on it, right? And that's what Joy was doing. Like, it's okay. You know, okay, you're sad, but like you have all these other things to be happy about. You shouldn't feel sad, right? It's so validating. Yeah, that is not a right word, but yeah. But that hit on something I try to tell my clients, especially like in couples counseling all the time, is we have to like own what we're feeling and share it, which is the hard part. But then our partner has to understand it and validate it. And then help it, right? Sometimes it's problem solving. Sometimes it's saying it's going to be okay. Sometimes it's like, yeah, that's sad, which is what sadness did. Is like, that is really sad. And that is helping. So understanding and validating is the best way to show empathy to someone and connect and work through stuff.
Yeah, it's not to put too much pressure on couples, right? What you're saying is that there has to be deliberate effort being put in. And when we're learning this stuff, it's not easy. But I think that what begins to happen is we start to see the value when we show up, we put effort, and we see that like our effort means something to someone we care about. And then vice versa, if we see someone we care about putting in effort, maybe they're not getting it right, but we see that at that attempt, it inspires us.
Yeah. Well, the language doesn't matter. I think we get so caught up in like, what do we need to say or how do we say it? But sometimes it's just, I'm here.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's one of the things Brene Brown says, right? Like if you just show up with someone and you say, hey, I'm here. Like, I'm in this with you, that goes so far. And that's kind of what we saw sadness trying to do from the entire movie, right? That was her whole purpose. She just wanted to be present with stuff, and it would have changed a lot.
Yeah, something that I think gets touched on, and I forget how deliberately, but what I wrote down is sadness is what helps us ask for empathy.
Yes.
So when we see it I think Joy starts to comment on it as she's spending a moment looking at this memory. She sees that when Riley is able to convey that sadness, that's what signals to parents to come. And I'll jump it back for a second.
Yeah, you're fine.
But that's something that I had commented on with Dad. When Dad wasn't paying attention, so you have Mom, Dad, and Riley sitting there, and Mom is trying to signal Dad, right? And she signals twice and then kind of signals him to pay attention, but he kind of feels embarrassed because he wasn't paying attention. And so instead of stepping into it and saying, sorry, I was like lost, I was yada yada, he goes into like this authoritative mode, right? And so he is worried about feeling embarrassed, worried about not being enough or not handling it right. So he takes it to the extreme, right? Put the foot down.
Yeah.
You know, and I had written that part down because I feel like that there was an attempted repair where he notices that something's wrong, right? So he does what you said. Where's my happy girl?
Yeah.
That's right. Goofball Island. And like, I
Yeah.
really hinted, that's where Goofball Island kind of went down. And then something that I think she said that he didn't respond well to, because he concretized himself. He said, I'm entering, I know something's wrong, and by golly, I'm going to solve this. She says, after being pushed, what is it? It's stop saying everything will be all right. And instead of saying, oh my gosh, that's such a hard thing to be saying, I think they initiate the foot down.
Yeah.
And he sends her to the room.
Which I think probably happens a lot as parents, right? That you want to help your child, but then they start giving you the attitude, right? Yeah. And we miss sometimes what's really going on, the content and the emotion behind the attitude that's coming. Yeah. So it's incredibly difficult to try to like set those appropriate boundaries so you don't get that disrespect, but then also be like, what's going on underneath? So we can, how do we talk about it? I'm curious about how you feel about the imagination land, and then the dream space.
I really wanted to try to spend some time like thinking about the dream space.
That sounds a lot like you.
But I felt like I wondered if maybe I was wanting it too much, so I actually kind of stepped out of it.
Okay.
But one things that I did comment on were about how like the emotions don't typically end up outside of HQ, but they were there anyway.
Yeah.
And so the one thought that I had was about how like in our dreams that we can have kind of emotions present in places that we wouldn't expect them to be.
Yeah.
You know, and so how we saw that we had two polarizing emotions trying to signal, you know, our waking life, right? So, you know, our happiness was trying to keep us blissful, right? It was trying, you know, joy was trying to wake us up with just so much happiness.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think I've ever woken up, you know, in the middle of the night, wow, I'm so happy. But sadness kind of signals that if we really want to get that attention, maybe we should draw something, you know, more intense.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we catch a glimpse of that when like the horse separates and it's like terrifying. And then of course when the clown kind of infiltrates the game.
She's awake.
Right. So there's ways that emotions try to signal us. So in our waking life, you know, we're trying to attend to them. And unattended, they fall, right? Like, because here's where my thoughts are lining up. You know, when we're not attending to our emotions, or we can't attend to our emotions, and they leave HQ, they fall, they collapse. Maybe they end up in a more subconscious, unconscious place, and so they try to speak to us that way.
Yeah, I think that's like I love the movie, and it's great for like I would say entry level and starting to think about like psyche and emotions and all the stuff that's going on inside of like our soul. But all this stuff's so complex that it's really hard to use some of these things to have like clear cut symbolization of this. Because for me, it's like headquarters is consciousness. Like that's what's going on, right? Whoever's pushing the buttons in the control, right? Because the memories, like there were so many memories, but you only remember them when they got recalled back. Yeah. So even the dream sequence, even that they separated in the movie is like the unconscious is like deeper and darker. Yeah. But then there's the dream stuff. But the dream stuff is unconscious. Like that's not stuff she has like an active state in. And I liked the fact that like the dream production was using the symbols of the day to tell a story, if you will. Yeah. Because that's what, when we do any type of dream work, is what we do is like a lot of the times things that we might be thinking about or familiar. Like I know when I'll have dreams, it is usually about something that's happened in my last week, but it's whatever's like conscious material my unconscious is using to try to like tell me something, right? Wake me up, scare me. Yeah. Give me so much joy to try to wake me up, you know. And then I loved how that part, they go into the unconscious. Yeah. And they get locked up in it. What were your thoughts about the subconscious in that deeper space?
Are you talking about like
where the clown was?
I feel like not much really stuck out. Okay. Other than the fact that it was like guarded, and I think that kind of pays respect to how we don't always have access to that level.
Yeah. I liked how, what I noticed is everything in the subconscious in the movie was huge. Everything was big. And it made me think like so much of what's going on inside of us, we don't know of.
Okay.
Right? Like everything's big. Like Jung would say, the consciousness is a cork and the unconscious is an ocean, right?
Yeah.
And the consciousness is...
Hey guys, it's Tyler again. I just wanted to jump in here and thank you for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to notice that the screen will go blank and there's not going to be any more video because our camera died halfway through recording. If you're listening to this on audio, nothing will change other than we kind of talk about the camera stopped recording, but we continue on really quickly. So that's just kind of what's going on. And since I have your attention, if you're finding this helpful, we are going to be launching a Patreon and we're going to be posting show notes and a bunch of other fun things and fun giveaways. And then we will also start to read any of the 5-star comments that you leave in iTunes. So if you're listening to this on an Apple product, go on and review us in iTunes, and we will be able to read your comments. And if we read your comments and you hear it on a future podcast, then we have a free prize for you, and we will tell you how to get a hold of that free prize then. So with that, let's get back to the rest of the podcast.
floating in the ocean.
Yeah.
It's that there's so much of us who we don't know, we don't understand that exist. And I loved how the movie used, like, everything was big. Like, the clown was massive, the broccoli was like, everything just seems so big. And I thought that was a great symbol of how there's so much going on inside of us.
I can definitely get behind that, recognizing that maybe when unconscious is finally able to maybe leave that guarded position, it is a very massive undertaking for us, and so when joy and sadness had to piggyback along the unconscious, it's kind of what got Riley to finally awake. And you're right, so our dreams will use a lot of like our readily available images to tell a story. I don't remember if it was Gary who said it, but and I know I definitely followed up with him in an email, which was the way that I understand dreams now is it's like taking 20 different movies, taking the scenes out and mashing them together to try to tell one story.
Yeah.
And at first glance, it might just seem chaotic, but if you take some time to understand what each scene means to you, it kind of puts together a story that helps kind of shine a light on maybe what's going on in that unconscious, subconscious level.
Yeah. Well, and when you do dream work, right? Like, the first thing I try to tell people is, like, if you're dreaming about somebody, it's not the person, right? Like, the fact that, like, Riley was dreaming about the clown.
Yeah.
Like, could it be that that's the darker side, or her, like, goofball island? Something deeper, right? Because when we dream about people, it's what they represent in ourselves, right? Yeah. So if you dream about your partner or you dream about your kids, like, it's okay, the child in you, or the person who you love that's inside you, it's trying to tell you something that very rarely when we have dreams is it about the actual person.
Yeah. And something that I think was really interesting is, I think, because so commonly...
Oh no, I think I lost the video.
Oh.
It's okay, keep talking. I'm going to go look at that.
Yeah. Let me reconnect with what I was saying. Talking about scenes, movies, emotions. Do you remember where we were with that?
Scenes, movie, when the camera died?
Yeah. See, so much of my thoughts are so candid. It can kind of throw me off kilter. But
so if you're listening on the podcast, sorry, the camera just died. And if you're watching, our camera died halfway through because I've never recorded this long. So
yeah,
we're back.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a fun edit.
I mean, right, making space for things, and I imagine that there'll just be a kind of a go dark moment on the camera, and the audio will be over it anyway.
Okay. How did you? So we'll just shift gears real fast.
Yeah.
What did you think about Bing Bong's death?
Man, so when I watched this, I was watching with my significant other, and she gets so distraught over these things. And so I actually knew more to look at her to get kind of the raw emotion. Because it was definitely sad, and it was a sacrifice that needed to be made, because it sounds like that preserving, our attachment to feeling joy, meant that maybe he couldn't exist anymore. So developmentally, we needed to graduate from imaginary friend. And so I think that his passing was actually probably developmentally appropriate.
Yeah. How hard it is for us sometimes to let go or let parts of us die.
Yeah.
So new parts of us can live.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I feel like that one moment is probably part of what the whole movie's about too. I think from that point to the end, the movie is really laid in with a lot of good content and got a lot of good emotions, where sometimes we need to mourn kind of what we knew, take that as kind of a, like, in memory of, this is something that brought a lot of joy in our life, but it doesn't spark joy anymore.
Yeah.
And so we can take elements of that. Well, what was joy like? And who am I now? And how do I apply that? So bing bong, imaginary friends we know are something that more common when we're younger. And maybe as we kind of grow past that, we find maybe more mature things.
Or we create imaginary boyfriends in our head and moves from imaginary friend to imaginary boyfriend.
Yeah. It graduates.
Yes. I mean, that is maturing. Like, I know I kind of like making light of it, but that is super maturing, right? To move from just that imaginary animal thing to an imaginary boyfriend. And that's...
Yeah. So my mindset, I wanted to pause because I think that that's something that maybe I glossed over, and I felt like you brought up into a greater point, which is our imagination and our fantasies really kind of show us where we're at developmentally, or even where we're at just kind of in this moment. So having the imaginary friend who is an amalgam of different animals isn't too reality focused once you get into 11, 12, 13, 14, but an imaginary boyfriend is. Because that kind of shows that what she's wanting and what she enjoys is growing.
Yeah. Well, and I always tell people, and we're actually going to do a couple of podcasts like this down the line, where we start looking at characters, right? So one of my favorite homework assignments for clients who want to learn parts of themselves is I say, go watch TV.
Yeah.
Great homework. Or go watch a couple movies and find the 5 to 10 characters that you connect with.
Yeah.
Bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So sometimes we'll dissect how are these characters connected? What are the parts of them that you're resonating with? And then starting to dissect all these things are amazing to learn about yourself. And I think that it shows up in imagination because we learn about who we are through what we watch.
Yeah.
Right? We resonate with certain things because that's who we are. So that's a way, a mature way that we actively imagine, use our imagination, but we can go inside and learn to do that on our own without media if we wanted.
Yeah. What you're talking about is just having the symbols that describe certain narratives or certain timelines and even certain emotions.
Yeah.
And I love the use of media. I use it a lot with clients where it's sometimes we can attach what we're going through to a character we've seen, and the way they play it out is the way that we wish we could. We just don't know how to get there yet.
Yeah.
And so we can get really attached to characters because they're like a transcendent function. They help us go from point A to point B.
And when the character shifts dramatically, we get you see it all on Twitterverse and everywhere. People get so frustrated and so upset because of it.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's because we're so connected and it's about us, and then all of a sudden they're doing something that doesn't align with that part of us.
Yeah.
And we don't like it, right? So the end of Game of Thrones, everybody was even the dude right there so frustrated, so upset with.
Yeah.
And it's because it didn't align with the parts of ourselves we saw in some of those characters.
Yeah.
It just shifted too quickly. It didn't explain it. So I think that's where we had paying attention to our imagination. Adults use a lot of imagination. We just don't realize that we're doing it.
Absolutely. And I think I fall into that. Sometimes I wish that people would write the characters I enjoy differently. And it's something I actually encourage clients. Because I have a lot of clients who fear finishing things. So, I'm into, a lot of video games, different kind of TV series. When they end, we have this depression and we feel like, well, now it's gone. And what I always kind of tell people is it's not gone.
Yeah.
It's what the content creators wrote is over. And this continues to live on for you. And so being able to take that really into your imagination now and to wonder, well, what would you want that character to do next?
Yeah.
And I think that really speaks to kind of our fantasies where we wish we could be.
Which makes me think...
That's my phone.
I was like... Hello? It makes me think about. Oh, it totally distracted me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It was great. It was a good. Oh, Star Wars. Sometimes when a story ends, when you come back to a character,
Yeah.
it's not the way you thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
And it doesn't resonate well with you, right? Like, I think The Last Jedi is a perfect example of, like, stuff not resonating with, like, a fan base, because so many people projected, like, the hero, right? We all have this hero inside of us with this hero archetype. We projected it onto Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And he won. Like, he did the hero's journey, right? And then all of a sudden we come back 30 years later and he's on a different journey.
Yep.
And that was so devastating, because sometimes we get stuck on those parts of ourselves. And that's where I think learning about the duality was kind of what you were talking about earlier, right? All these different parts of ourselves, all the different personality islands have to coexist. And sometimes they get activated in really weird ways.
Yeah.
What are your kind of final thoughts on overall the movie before we kind of talk about, like, a few characters that stood out?
Really what stuck out and kind of what I had kind of wrote kind of in caps and in bold here was that the story was just about needing to be validated, and how I think culturally we've associated joy as the emotion to have, and how that kind of fostered that toxicity, that toxic positivity that we were talking about earlier, and that what this really did was allowed us to see how different emotions have functions that are adaptive and helpful for us, and it also signals to us that we need to be mindful of understanding why emotions exist. Right, so to kind of tie it in with, like, a biological thing, because I think that we understand biology way more than we understand, mental health.
Absolutely.
If it's in our body and if we have it, it serves a function, and if not, our body would begin to remove it. Right, what is it that there's that? I don't know if it's real or not. Like, right, we had tails before.
Yeah.
Spleens. We're starting to be born without them because we don't need them, and wisdom teeth. Even some people are fortunate enough to not have to get all their wisdom teeth pulled out because they're just not suitable anymore.
Yeah.
So through all this evolutionary kind of items, if we still have these emotions, it's because they serve a function.
Absolutely. I think my big takeaway from the movie is it starts off simple, right? Like, Joy, when Riley's born, like, it's how the movie starts, right? Yeah. She's there by herself, right? Our souls, our psyches start off really simple. Yeah. And as the movie progresses, and even, right, they make the jokes at the end, and that's when John Ratzenberger shows up and everything, is the console got more complex. There's more personality islands. The emotions, like, even when you look on the wall, are merged, right? There's multiple emotions in a certain memory. And I think one of the things that we don't always give ourselves credit for in the movie was kind of projecting, which would be amazing if they ever did a sequel on, which would be things get more complex, right? Parts of ourselves get way more complex. That's why I always enjoy, the older you are coming into therapy, there's a lot more to work with and a lot more to explore because you have more life experience. Sometimes I don't work with teenagers for a reason. And that's because it's hard for me to kind of go into that deeper space. Some people are really, really good at it. Like, you're much better at it than me. But it's hard for me to do that. But somebody in their 30s or 40s who are really kind of trying to figure out the parts of themselves, like, I thrive in that space. Yeah. So that's one of the big things from the movie for me that stood out, was how complicated we grow, and that just keeps happening.
Yeah, and I think, to kind of speak to your point, I think the reason why I do so well with, like, teens is because I speak their language. I speak cartoons, anime, and video games.
Yeah.
And I think adults are just more equipped to identify the parts of them. And I think that teens just maybe, like, know what they like, but they don't ascribe meaning to it. And I love being able to help ascribe meaning to something. But I think that you're absolutely correct that, as we kind of have more life experience, we can see how things aren't so black and white. We can see the complexity. And as we are educated in that, or as we're kind of in that trial by fire as we learn it, it's something that we can attend to and we can speak to a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move into the last section. So I wanted to ask you about what, like, any character standouts or anything about a character from the movie that you liked.
I think we've glossed over them kind of already, but just to kind of speak to it, something I found that was, I've harped on Joy enough, so I'm gonna kind of give her some kudos here at the end here. Something that Joy did, and something that you see Joy do, is the very first time she cries. I think that there was a moment she she validates sadness when she sees what she's able to do. And once Joy validates sadness and kind of encourages her to come back to the console, boom, the console comes back to life.
Yeah.
And so then I think when other emotions give space, I think that's what Joy was able to do. So I think it's no coincidence that she was the first emotion and that she was the first one that had to usher in this change where it's you have a space too, you have a function. So once she was on her journey and she could see what Joy could do, right? She saw Joy helping Bong. She saw the memories for herself, and she saw how that was helpful. I think that Joy shows what we need to give everybody, which is some credit and some patience. It's not that she was toxic. She perpetuated that for a bit, but she was just uninformed and unaware.
Yeah.
And so I think that what she showed is some grace, and I think that's kind of what we need sometimes, especially when we enter therapy, is that it's not going to be quick. Not just because you're learning how to speak emotions doesn't mean that everybody else around you is going to.
Absolutely. And just because you're learning to identify and speak doesn't mean you understand.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes, like I say, we have to try to understand what the emotion is telling us, not just react because we know what it is.
Yeah.
I think one thing that stood out to me is the fact, like, anger, because if you notice, he's the one who came up with a really bad idea of running away. But a lot of the times, for me at least, when people are angry, it's because there's something else going on, but they don't know how to process it. So anger is what comes out. And really, in a way, that's what the movie happened, is like fear, anger, and disgust controlled the show, all very surface emotions, because something else was going on.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't know how to process sadness. We didn't know how to process maybe grief, like you were saying earlier. Yeah. And those emotions who had control kind of showed, like, when we let fear, anxiety, anger, frustration control the console, we tend to not get our emotional needs met. Like, I would say there's a difference, for me at least, between what I always like to call righteous anger, which is when someone is doing something to someone else and we feel that person's pain. Yeah. Right? We're angry that they're having to go through it, right? Yeah. When you see somebody kick a dog, like, we're angry. Like, that makes people mad for good reasons. Like, that's really righteous because you're seeing suffering and you're getting worked up for it. But when I'm angry at my partner, I'm not really angry. I'm disappointed. I'm hurt. I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling like my needs aren't getting met. So I show anger. I feel anger, but I'm not curious about what's underneath the anger. So I kind of like how the movie used him to, like, as a mask to what's really going on.
Yeah, interestingly enough, because I think one of my comments was, every time an island ends, it seems like anger was there. And then I think it's interesting, and I want to kind of take a crack at it without saying that this is how it works. I think that sometimes anger is needed. Healthy aggression is needed to get up, but I think that we don't understand how to use that energy once we get it. And that's kind of where we want to slow down and want to create that grace, that patience.
Yes, absolutely.
Moving into one thing that I think was important to talk about with sadness is sadness had a purpose. Sadness knew that something needed to be done. But by 3/4 into the movie, she got disconnected from that. And actually, she started to believe Joy's rejection and dismissing. And I think there was a point where sadness starts to feel invalidated. That she sits there and she goes, what's the point? I'm not helpful. Just kind of leave me be. Yeah. And I think that kind of goes to show that when we're beat down so much, when we're only soaking in, like, toxic communication, how we can over-identify with that. And this is where, thankfully, the same time that Joy was losing purpose, or Joy was creating space for sadness, that's where sadness was starting to fall. So Joy can kind of come and pick her up.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other characters that stood out? I have one more.
Not for me. Okay. I'm interested to hear what your last character is.
Okay, so Mike said this to me when we were watching it, and I had seen it on, like, a couple YouTube videos before too. Is the mom's lead person was sadness, and the dad's lead person was anger.
Yes.
And I think it was an interesting dynamic to show how sometimes maybe mom has a little bit of depression, or dad has maybe some anger stuff going on that we just don't know about, and again, it's super simplified. Yeah. But I think it shows the importance of different emotions can kind of take the lead. Yeah. And then sometimes we're just, I always talk about, like, people's personality traits. Like, you're just born into it, right? Like, I have 2 young nieces that are under the age of 5. They have very different personalities. Yeah. and they've not been alive long enough for a lot of stuff to influence it. So I think sometimes we do have certain emotions or certain parts of us that take more control from the very beginning, and it just is, right? Like there's no reason for it. Sometimes it's influenced and it's reinforced, but it just is. Like for Riley, it was joy, right? For Mom, maybe it was sadness was always kind of in the lead. Like I think about myself and my parents. I'm always like a go-getter. Surprising, I know for you, right? Why we started this podcast. I'm the go-getter. Right. But like at the age of like 6 months or something, I was sitting in a high chair at a restaurant, and I was trying to play with like a straw or something, so they moved it away. Or no, it was like something on the table I was trying to play with, like an ashtray, and this is how long ago it was in a restaurant. And they moved it away, so I took a fork, like 6 months old, and like reached over and grabbed and was trying to pull it with me. So it's like, even at 6 months, if there was something I wanted to do, I'm going to find a way to do it. Okay. And that's kind of just stayed with me. And I think that's one thing that stood out to me is that sometimes there's these parts of us that just are. Yeah. And we just have to get to know them and understand it.
Absolutely. It's interesting because as you say that, kind of the way I'm thinking about that is within Riley, where she is, younger and she's still developing, they don't know like their functions yet, and they're all kind of just jumping onto the console. But with Mom and Dad as well, they're all sitting together and they're making unanimous decisions. There's just a figurehead, and so I think that kind of speaks to, we do have a primary mode of entering a situation, and once we learn kind of what the other functions are, we can sit together and we can kind of convert and make less impulsive decisions.
Hopefully less impulsive decisions as we mature.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So any other thoughts over the whole movie, or the experience kind of breaking it down? Anything came up today?
I don't know if it's fair, because I have a couple comments, and I know that we're wrapping up, and so this might be kind of like leaving on teasers, and maybe if there's more kind of that people want to hear about it, we can definitely get into them. Things that I noticed was in Riley's mind, the emotions had more of a combination of genders and gender expression and conformity, where when we saw Mom and Dad, I feel like even if there were like slight hints of androgyny in some characters, they all had, they all looked like Mom, they all looked like Dad. And of course, one part of me was like, well, it's just so you know whose mind you're in. Yeah. But at the same time, it kind of got me wondering if maybe Mom and Dad are more concretized in their gender expression and gender identity, where Riley's still 11, and so that these
figuring out who she is. Yeah. Right. Why do teenagers want to have crazy haircuts or dye their hair? Trying to figure out who they are. Yeah.
And so that was something that really stuck out to me, and something that I don't think was like, I don't know if it was like super intentional by them, but it's something I definitely picked up on along the way. Even with the boy, kind of at the end, even when we take a glance at his mind, they all have started to take a shape. Yes. I think there was only one emotion in his head that was a little feminine. Yeah.
No, I like that. I had that thought too. I think I had that in my notes. We get into it today. One of the big takeaways for me was the question I had, and this would be like definitely for the directors, is like, do the emotions have emotions, right? Because it's like we're giving characters to something that doesn't have a character, right? Like joy doesn't really have like a character arc in our lives, like it just exists. So it was just this deeper space, which is like so many things are so complex. Yeah. That we could always kind of go to a deeper level and understand it. I think what you said a while ago was great. If you're listening to this, what you can do is, one, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, like it. We're posting this on all podcast players, so you can listen to it from your favorite podcast player. Go on, subscribe to it so you don't miss an episode, and comment and review, because that helps it grow. And if this grows, we'll continue to do more of them. Absolutely. If there's comments or there's questions you have or something we talked about that you're interested in that you'd like to see, you can leave a comment on the YouTube channel, or you can go to our website at thedisneytherapist.com and leave us a comment. I'll have a page that you can send comments or questions, and we'll have all the shows posted there, along with a transcript of the entire episode on the website. So what you'll do is go to the disneytherapist.com /episode 1. And you'll have a transcript of this and the YouTube videos and everything else we posted all in one space for you. So that's all that I have. Do you have anything else?
Nope. I think that you kind of summarized everything. This is fun, and I can't wait to do more of it. And
how does it feel to record your very first one?
I think I was way more nervous at the beginning. I think as we kind of get into just the dialogue and talking, you know my mind, it kind of goes everywhere, and I can get really stuck in that. So I'm gonna stop before I start getting into more like just explaining.
Okay.
So
Awesome. Okay, with that, we will see you guys next week.